Welcome to the Finer Games Club.
All right, welcome to the Finer Games Club, where high class taste meets low tier gameplay. My name is Martijn, aka Foodie.
And I am Martin, aka Vishy. Cheers. Good to see you, Martijn.
Cheers, Martin. Nice to see you again. And welcome to this new format. What is this? Why are we doing this even? What's going on?
What's going on is that we are two middle-aged men who have nothing better to do with their time than to play video games and exchange each other about it. And this exchange is something that is so natural to us at this point that we thought what the world is really missing is yet another gaming podcast. So let's do this in a public forum and have you, the audience, be a part of this exchange. So a little bit about myself. So I'm a musician. I'm a guitar player. I'm actually a YouTuber as well. If you Google Martin Miller or put Martin Miller into YouTube, you'll find my music. So YouTubing is something I do naturally anyway, but I do have just a knack for game design and thinking about it. And it's something that I see many parallels to art and music in, and it's something that has always been fascinating to me. I've been a gamer since the 90s. I'm now 40 years old. I grew up with 90s PC gaming. And I've never stopped playing.
No, same for me. I'm a little younger. I'm 34, almost 35, and I grew up with PC gaming and also a little bit console gaming as well. I think it was my dad that kind of got me into gaming. He bought the first PCs, and then we started playing simple games on PC, and that was, I would say, also kind of the mid 90s that happened. And yeah, now I'm almost 35, and I'm still sitting here, still thinking of gaming. And I think what unites us is the way that we look at games. I think some opinion that we both have is that gaming is an art form.
100%, yes.
And yeah, that it deserves the same kind of critiquing as other types of art, like painting or music. And yeah, it should be kind of obvious. I'm not a professional musician, but I'm a musician as well. And I think even when we talk about music, we talk about music in a very similar way as we talk about gaming. It's almost the same conversation, just a different topic, I think.
Yes, my mind is generally very analytical. I tend to overthink the smallest of decisions, and I feel like that seeps into other parts of my life. So even nowadays, when I play a video game, I cannot just sit there and have the video game wash over me. There is some part of me that analyzes the communication, that analyzes the communication of the game designer towards me, in some way.
Yeah, yeah. You're always working on figuring out what is this doing to me, and not in a bad way, but more like what kind of influence does it have on me, and what do I think about it, and when I like it, why do I like it? Why don't I like it?
Yes, and the cool thing is there's no pressure attached to this. If two people listen to this or watch this, like our partners,
totally
whatever,
fine. Yeah,
that's good enough for us. And what we wanted to do today is we named this episode Gothic, the best RPG you have never played. And the reason for that is that, first of all, Gothic is possibly my favorite game of all time, at the very least top 3. We both have very different histories with the game Gothic, and it's also a topical thing because we have just gotten a release of the demo of the Gothic remake. So it's something that is on our agendas. It's something that is very recent, but also that, at least for me, has a lot of history. I've played Gothic the year that it came out. When was that actually? Was it 98? Was it 98? Is it, how long ago is that?
I think it's a bit later, actually. Wasn't it 2001?
My God, I'm getting my history so wrong. Yeah, 2001. You're right.
2001,
so at the time, I was 16 years old. And when you're 16 years old, you're very, very impressionable. So when Gothic came out at the time, it absolutely blew my mind. Like, it was no doubt at the time my favorite game that I've ever played. And the interesting thing is now that if I discuss this, when I play a game like Gothic nowadays, obviously you would think that I'm so blinded by nostalgia. For example, let's look at the art style of Gothic. I think Gothic in 4K resolution with a DirectX 11 shader still looks absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes, it looks a little square and a little clunky, but the art design can stand on its
timeless
own
look.
feet. So
Yeah.
it's a timeless look. And because the first thing people tend to say is that it looks very dated. And I fully disagree with that. And that might be my nostalgia speaking, but I know that you don't have nostalgia for the game.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly the difference between us, because I think the Gothic franchise at the time that it came out in Germany, of course, because it was made by Piranha Bytes, a German company, it was pretty much top of mind and popular here. But well, seeing as I do live in Germany nowadays, but I am from the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands the game was not known at all. I don't think anybody actually knew about it, and I also didn't play it back in the day. I was gaming back in the day, but I'd never played Gothic. So I think my first experience with Gothic was, I have to think, 2020. Because you
Yes.
recommended it to me. You
That's
recommended
true.
that I should play Gothic, at least try one of the Gothics, and I started with Gothic 2, which I finished pretty quickly. And after that, I played Gothic 1. And by now, actually, Gothic 2 is in my top 5 favorite games of all time.
You listen
So,
to that, people. You listen to that. That is incredible. Top
yeah,
5 game of all time. No
no
nostalgia.
nostalgia at all. No, no. I must say, however, and that's of course always a big discussion with older games, right? When there are certain people that function in a way that if you present an older game to them and they look at it and they see that it's old, right? They see that it has kind of like older graphics, they just kind of like block it out. Like they're just not willing to look at other things or look at the
Yes.
gameplay or anything like that. The graphics just stops them from looking any deeper into it. I'm not one of those people. I do like games that look nice, but I'm much more focused on gameplay, story, exploration, those kind of things. So that was acceptable for me at least. And yeah, I was blown away by the design of Gothic 2 and also later
Mhm.
Gothic 1. But Gothic 2 was the one that I played first.
So yeah, there are some design core ideas in Gothic that I don't think many modern games pull off very well or at all.
At all, yeah.
Yes. And first of all, apart from a few dungeons here and there, the whole world is explorable without a loading screen. And this at the time this game was competing with Morrowind.
Mhm.
So that's pretty crazy to think about. And by
That's
the
a
way,
big competitor. Yeah.
it's a huge competitor. It's probably what stopped it from being more popular in the wider world. I'm from Germany, so obviously it had a huge cultural impact here. I think it's mostly popular in Germany and Poland, from what I understand.
Yeah, I think so too.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so the design is very, very interesting. I want to point out. Do you want to point out a few things, like a few design pillars that impress you the most? And I'm gonna deliver some things that I think are really impressive.
Yeah. I think there is one gripe that I have with a lot of modern, particularly open world games, and that is that I'm not sure when this trend started. I think it was somewhere in the 2010s, where a lot of the games started driving more the world size. Like the focus was really on, or and is still today, I think, on delivering a world that is big, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
games started actively marketing like our world is 5 times bigger than X or 10 times bigger than Y or something like that. And I never really understood the appeal of that. I really didn't like that because I feel that if you have a finite amount of time to create a world, right, then
Mm-hmm.
immediately, if you're going to increase the world tenfold, that means that on every single square meter, if you want to express it in that way, you're going to spend 10%, you're going to just spend 10 times less time, right?
I think it makes sense that in the early 2000s, that would be a huge selling point. Because back in the day, we didn't have
But there was
those
a technical
types of
limitation.
mega
They couldn't
open
make
worlds.
They couldn't
Yeah.
make it that large. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Unless
that
it's like a game like Daggerfall, because like Elder Scrolls Daggerfall
Yeah.
was a game that is like, I think, the size of Great Britain.
yes,
but it was
it's very big, but it
procedurally
was
generated.
I think it was procedurally generated. One of the very
Yes.
first games where they did that. But coming back to Gothic in that regard, I think with Gothic, one thing that I really noticed when I played it for the first time is like, well, the world is not so big in size, but it feels big because it's all nicely situated and gated, and there are mountains in the way to stop you from really seeing what's pretty close by on the other side. And at the same time, the world is very deliberately crafted. There is something to find absolutely everywhere, in every single
Yes.
corner. You walk around, you find a secret cave. There are some enemies there. There are some bodies there. There is some environmental storytelling there that in games where the worlds are generally larger and you're more focused on chasing, I don't know, map markers or something like that, that environmental storytelling is not really there. I always preferred worlds that are much smaller, but are more deliberately crafted and where the content is very distinguished. Where you don't just find, as Starfield for me is one of the best examples that are completely on the other side of the scale, where you have 1,000 planets that are completely equal, rather the only difference is the color scheme and maybe some plants or something like that, but all the planets have the same 10 buildings on them, right? They look exactly the same. And to me, that is not content. That's just a veil that's pulled over your eyes to make you think that there is a lot of content. But yeah, Gothic doesn't do it that way. Everything's
It's very
really
interesting.
handcrafted.
So first of all, Gothic doesn't utilize any quest markers, right? So if you go into it, so for those who don't know, Gothic consists is a prison colony that you can enter but not escape, and it's a free roam prison. So there's a magic barrier around this area of the map that criminals get thrown into, but they cannot leave it. And the magicians who made this barrier happen also got caught within that magic barrier.
Because it became
And-
bigger than it was originally intended to be,
Yes.
I believe.
So it was an accident. And what happened now is that 3 different camps formed. So you have the old camp, where the directive is, it's basically like led by by a warlord type named Gomez, who has established a hierarchy where he's at the top of the food chain, and he basically is comfortable with where he's at.
Yeah.
Then you have the new camp who are trying to gather this substance called magic ore, and they want to pile it up and blow it up in order to remove the magic barrier. And then you have a cult-like formation that is called what is it called in
The
English?
sect
actually?
or the swamp camp, I believe.
The swamp camp, yes.
Yeah.
So it's a sect that smokes some kind of weed all day and gets high and prays to a deity. So and what you're going to do is you're going to go to the old camp first. Naturally, that's where the game signposts you. But you're going to meet somebody there from the swamp camp, and they'll tell you, well, check out the swamp camp. It's a really cool community, and we could use you there. And as a player, your choice in the first chapter will be to choose one of the factions that you're going to side with, and that's going to decide what the rest of the game will be like. And instead of giving you a quest marker, go here. Here's the swamp camp. What happens is there is a delivery boy or a delivery guy from the swamp camp in the old camp, and he delivers the weed, the substance that everybody smokes. And the way they make money is by selling it to the other camps. So that person has a reason to be there. There is a lore reason why that person is there. And it makes sense within the world why that person is there. And obviously the interest of that person is for you to join the swamp camps because they need what are they called? Recruits, not novices.
Yeah, like
whatever they
novices,
call them. They have different novices. They
Novizen
have
in
different
German,
names.
novices, yeah.
Novizen, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the guy, instead of getting you a quest marker and going, I've marked it on your map, go there, he actually offers to take you there. And what happens is so amazing because you can agree to this and you can follow this guy around. And this will take you a solid 15 minutes of tracking to go to the next camp. But what happens is you're an extreme weakling. You cannot even take it up with a scavenger, which is this like bird-like creature.
Almost
that'll
the
kick
most basic enemy, not entirely.
the most
but
basic enemy. It
almost.
will kick the shit out of you. But what you can do is follow this guy around and draw the enemies to him, and he'll take care of them for you. So you go on this little quest, this little adventure that is not fully scripted, because it's like the enemy movement is systemic. The monsters will like wolves in the woods will walk around, and there is a chance you dodge them or there's a chance you run into them, and depending on that NPC will engage in attacking them, and he'll help you and share the XP with you. And so you go on this little naturally occurring adventure on your way to the swamp camp.
And at the same time, you're learning the way how to get there, right? Because that's not explained
Yes.
to you in any other way. It's
No, but it is given to you by an expert who knows the way.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But that type
So-
of design you see also in other places in Gothic, where instead of relying on quest markers, because well, we earlier established already, Gothic does not use quest markers. So how does it tell you where to go? Well, the game doesn't tell you; the characters do, right? So.
Yes.
You can imagine that you talk to a character and he's talking to you about a cave where he lost something and a ring or something, and you need to go there and get it for him. And then instead of just plopping a quest marker on your screen, because Gothic doesn't have that, instead the character explains to you step by step how to get there. For instance, you go to the south gate of the camp, you exit the gate there, you cross the bridge that you see, and then you keep going until you see a big tree. At the big tree, you turn right, and then you have to look left. You will see the entrance of the cave in the rock wall, for instance. And I really, really like that type of design because it's an in-game lore-specific, lore-consistent way of getting you where you need to go, right? Instead of just going the cheap way and just saying like, okay, here's a marker, there's a little thing that you can follow, because then they wouldn't need to do that, right?
But the same thing even goes for game mechanics. Even game mechanics are explained to you from the characters, because the way you level up your sword skill, for instance, is by going to a trainer, and that trainer will explain to you that at first, like you find a one-hand sword and you hold it with both hands, and the combat is clunky as all hell.
Yeah, it's very
But
slow.
what happens is you take a lesson from the trainer, and he'll say, "No, hold the sword in one hand, and then swipe it left, and then swipe it right, and then swipe it forward to do a combo."
Use your body weight to increase the speed of the strikes, and that's something
But he
you
basically
physically
tells you
see.
he basically tells you to press left, press right, press left, press right, and that's how you get a combo going.
Exactly.
So, but
yeah.
he's not telling you to press the A button, the D button, and the A button.
Yeah.
He's telling the character in the game what to do, and you as a player, because the game assumes that you're an adult, or at least a young individual that is capable of thinking for themselves, figure out how that would translate onto the keyboard. So
Yeah.
I think I like a game that respects my intelligence that way.
Yeah. And that doesn't use like Gothic doesn't really have, as far as I know, you can correct me probably, I don't think there's any like tutorial pop-ups or something like that, where the game really puts like a message on your screen and tells you like, this is how you're supposed to do this. It's all characters telling you things.
Yeah, but there is a caveat to that, because that is from a time where games came with manuals. So the game
That is also
literally
true,
tells you
yeah.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And you kind of were expected to look up
But
the
I
manual
didn't
on
have
how
the
to
manual
move.
when I was playing
Yeah.
Gothic 2, and I was still able to play it. So
But the controls are very idiosyncratic, like holding control and then pressing left and right to
it's
to
a little
open yeah.
like the controls are a little dated, I think.
Yes.
But
for sure.
I would say, and that's just my personal opinion, I would say the combat system is fun because there is you can button bash in Gothic. It doesn't work.
Nope.
You really need to be very deliberate about your strikes, and Because if you just keep holding a single button or pressing a single button, you will not break through the defenses of an enemy, and they will probably just hit you once and then stun you, and you'll pretty much die. So there's some semblance of intelligence there, and a lot of modern RPGs are not really like that either. If you think about Skyrim or Morrowind, at least if you, well, maybe not Morrowind, but Skyrim and Oblivion, if you are a warrior type character, then it's mostly fine if you just keep hitting left mouse button over and over again, as long as your gear is good enough. And in Gothic, that doesn't work at all.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, the Gothic combat system is largely skill-based. It's not this... you'll have a hard time, like in the Souls community, you'll have like a broken sword, no armor run, level 1 run. And that is very much possible, but that is not possible within the Gothic world. Because that is actually another core design element, is that the world is fully open to you, but it's naturally gated through the enemy's strength. And what is very interesting about this is that the enemies don't come in levels. So the amount of HP
in the background,
they have them, but they're not
them.
communicated to you. No. And you do not have, like, as far as monsters and animals go, not as far as human NPCs go, you do not have, let's say take the wolves in the woods. There are no different levels of wolf if they are the same
the same type of enemy.
The same type of enemy.
Yeah.
There are young wolves, and that's why I'm struggling to express myself here. There are young wolves that are weaker, but they're visibly weaker. They're tinier,
smaller.
They're much
less aggressive.
smaller.
Yeah.
They look less aggressive. They look less strong. But any wolf in the world will be roughly the same level, or will be exactly the same level. Actually,
it's exactly the same. Yeah.
They don't have a level attached. So you're not going to run into a level 10 versus a level 15 wolf, and you'll naturally see that if you look at an enemy like the Dragon Snapper, that is a much more daunting looking enemy. It looks much more aggressive and dangerous. And so it'll be much more difficult to fight than a scavenger, which looks kind of
or the regular snapper.
wimpy.
Right? This might be the moment where we could just put on screen like a picture of a snapper and a picture of a dragon snapper. And
but let's
you'll
not
be able
pretend
to
we're going to do that.
Let's not
pretend we're actually going to do that. But yes,
but you
regular
could,
snapper
right?
versus dragon snapper. Yeah. The visual design is congruent with the gameplay design.
Yeah.
So
you're just walking around and you see an enemy and you're looking at it and you're like, oh, it's all spiky. It looks aggressive. It looks dangerous.
And it's big.
Super black.
It's big.
It's big. Yeah. It looks daunting to attack it. And you're completely right. A dragon snapper is an end game level enemy which will kill you in one hit at least until halfway or something like that. And maybe
and once again, that's an in-world solution to this problem of enemy strength. It is. We can apply a real-world logic to this, and that's what I find really fascinating. There is no gamified system.
Yeah.
Forced
Nowadays,
upon
you
this.
just see like a red skull hovering over the enemy, just telling you like you should not attack this enemy. But Gothic doesn't need that. It doesn't need it.
Yeah, but an adult with basic entry-level armor and a wooden club would know not to attack a troll.
Yeah.
Which is like 5 times the size of you.
Or a human enemy that's in full plate armor, for instance.
Yes.
The same.
True. Yes. So I think that is really unique. I also love, I've kind of touched on this, I love the fact that your attack, when you level up your combat skills, you don't just deal more damage, the actual animation of the attacks change.
Yes.
That means if you're, as I said at the beginning, you're holding a one-handed weapon with 2 hands, and when you've maxed out that level, you're swinging the weapon at the speed of light.
There's like flourishes and twirls and things.
Different combos.
You see your character progressing as a fighter rather than, instead of 20 damage, my weapon now does 40 damage or something. That happens also in the background if you get better gear. But this visual change of the stances, the battle stances, that's something that I can't remember any other game where that really happens.
And each item is more or less unique. Yes, you find multiple one-handed swords, but the same one-handed sword will deal the same amount of damage. But then there are some unique weapons. Like if you kill an NPC, like I think Scar has the best sword in the game. If you kill Scar, you take Scar's sword.
One
and
of
it's
the
called
best,
Scar's
yeah,
sword.
yeah.
And that will be the only Scar sword in the entire game that deals that exact type of damage and looks that way. It's not a long sword plus 50 as opposed to a long sword plus 60.
Yeah.
Once again, diegetic. This exists. This is logic that exists within the world.
Yeah. It's not just an item that you pick up, oh, it has plus 15 damage and plus 5 defense or something like that.
This is something that always bothered me in The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
Like there will be a quest line leading up to finding like a legendary weapon. And only using this legendary weapon are you going to defeat this legendary foe. And if you've done enough side questing, you get to that quest, you take the weapon, and oh yeah, this is dog shit. The thing I have is way better.
Yeah. And in the end, it's all about numbers, right?
Yes, it's a numbers game. Yeah, and let's not pretend that like Gothic has this super elaborate like progression system. It's simple, but it's
effective within the
it's
lore
effective.
and the words. Yeah.
What is really effective about it is you're not going to put too many. You don't receive too many skill points. Because actually, every skill point that you invest into, whether that's an actual skill like lockpicking or fighting, or into your character stat like strength or dexterity, will have a significant difference. So that means when every 25 minutes you level up, that will feel like a massive achievement. Because suddenly what happens is, oh, I get to upgrade my combat skill now. That means I'm now able to access a part of the world that was not accessible to me before, based solely on the fact that I couldn't beat the damn wolves.
Yeah.
And now I can.
Also the weapons have like a minimum strength or a minimum agility requirement. So if you have a new weapon that you couldn't use yet because you needed 30 strength and you attain that 30 strength, and all of a sudden you can use the weapon. The strength itself increases your damage as well. And the base damage from the weapon is also adding into that. So then all of a sudden, one of those gates that wasn't really a gate, because if you're a really good fighter, then some enemies you can beat earlier, but you would need to be really, really good. But I think for most average players, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that wolf was just 2 hours or 3 hours ago. That wolf was extremely hard to beat. Now all of a sudden I approach it and I hit it 2 times and it's dead. And
it's the same with armor. Like armor is strongly gated by the progression within the story.
Correct.
Like you won't be able to access any decent armor until you join one of the camps. And joining one of the camps is no easy task because it requires you to do quite a bit of busy work to get there. But once that's done, and that could be possibly an 8-hour quest to join the old camp, because it comprises of multiple quests that you have to fulfill in order to be even heard by the leaders of the old camp and to be accepted into their realm. So, but once you've proven yourself to them, you get the armor, and suddenly you start looking like the members of the old camp because they give you the armor that is specific to the old camp. Suddenly, you look like one of them. Suddenly, people talk to you differently. And suddenly, you have so much damage absorption that once again, you get to go out into the world and do things you weren't able to do before.
Yeah.
So all of this plays into each other so beautifully. And I can't think of another RPG that does it quite like that.
Yeah. I also remember from, I think both Gothic 1 and Gothic 2, that it's not like you're running along a road and all of a sudden you hit an enemy that you cannot defeat. It's kind of explained to you also that the roads are generally safer. So when you go off-road, then you're more likely to engage in enemies that are more dangerous. So in the beginning, you're really stuck to staying on the roads, trying to avoid enemies as much as possible because you literally can't defeat them. And then all of a sudden, that requirement of staying on the road kind of like slowly drops away, and you're able to kind of venture off-road a little bit more and go to areas where you couldn't be before. And some of the areas are admittedly quite close to where you already were before, just you couldn't get there because of the enemies that were in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of goblins.
And that also
hogging the
ties
bridge
back
or
into the
whatever, yeah.
earlier point, right? That makes it so that the world doesn't really need to be that big, right? Because there's something organic in the way in terms of enemies that stop you from going somewhere where you shouldn't be going at that point.
I also
yet.
love, I generally love the enemy placement, particularly the monsters, because there is something, there's inherent logic to it. Like blood flies will be near swamps or near water. Dragon snappers will be in the mountains. Trolls will be near caves and bridges. So that is absolute logic. There, it doesn't feel like a game designer spread them out logically and evenly over the map.
Yeah, just like
or
sprinkling
not
some
like
salt
in a
over
gamey
the
way,
map.
but in a lore accurate way. Like there is a reason the dragon snapper is here, and there's a reason the blood fly is over here.
Yeah. There was a point
Like
that you made
yeah.
earlier, where you were talking about making a name for yourself in the camp and how your standing changes in the beginning versus later. And I think that ties into one of the other big points that I found really positive about Gothic, and that is that Gothic is, for me, one of the very few RPGs that is non-player centric. A lot of RPGs feel like the world is mostly a canvas that exists solely for you as the player, right? You really notice that it's some kind of gallery that you are walking through, and everybody is there because of you. And in Gothic, it's completely
let's just
different.
name it. Let's just say it as it is, Skyrim.
Yeah. Even though I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Bethesda games. I love
Me too.
Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim maybe a little bit less. I think Oblivion
I
is my
love
favorite
Oblivion.
one.
I
Yeah.
adore Oblivion. Yeah.
But it's very different than Gothic in that respect, because when you start Gothic, you literally start as a nobody, right? So the hero is nameless, right? He isn't actually nameless, but nobody knows what he is called. And this is not really a spoiler because it happens in the very first kind of second when you get in. You talk to your very first character, really, which would be Diego, and the very first thing that your character tries to do is try to tell him what his name is. He tries to introduce himself, and he gets interrupted, and he says like, nobody here cares about your name, right? And this really this sets the tone for the rest of the game, or at least the first half of the game, where you're an actual nobody. The world revolves around the camps. It does not revolve around you as a player. You're just some guy that was thrown into the prison colony and that nobody knows, nobody cares about, and nobody trusts. And everybody wants to...
You have to make decisions that lock you out of parts of the game.
Correct.
When you join the old camp, you're not going to join the new camp, and you're not going to join the swamp camp. Now, admittedly, in Gothic, the consequences of that are relatively minor. But in Gothic 2, you might be playing a completely different game from Chapter 2.
Yeah, you actually have to replay the game multiple times if you want to experience everything, because there are completely different quests based on which faction you actually decide to join.
And people talk to you differently depending on... Like, what I love about Gothic 2 is, let's say you're a nobody, you walk through the city, people have a certain attitude towards you. But then you join the Paladins, and people's attitude towards you completely changes.
You're like, oh wow, you're our protector. But some people are wary of you as well, because they feel that the Paladins came in are mostly thinking about themselves, right? Which is kind of true as well, because they're there because of the ore, right? That's their main reason for being there.
And in Onar's camp, anybody will hate you if you're a paladin.
Yeah, exactly, because they're like, you're one of the lame people, and they just don't like you. Yeah, but that's like
authoritarian. Yeah,
Gothic 1, when the first time you get to the old camp, which is, as you said, it's the most logical place to end up, right? When you start.
The game is not forcing you there, but it's strongly signposting you there.
Yeah, it's the first thing you see, and it's like that. I remember that I sent you this picture on WhatsApp the very first time that I played the remake demo, and I made this picture of that overlook onto the old
Yeah.
camp, right? And that's the exact same thing that you get also in Gothic 1, in the original, where you're coming out of this initial gully where we're walking out. And then the very first thing you see there is the old camp. It looks kind of not super majestic or something, but it has a tower and everything. Your gaze is naturally drawn towards there. And it's also the most logical place to start your kind of adventure. And then right after you come in, you immediately logically meet one of the most funny characters that you
Yeah.
could
So you were
possibly
talking about Bloodwind here?
exactly. Maybe you can
Oh yeah.
explain who Bloodwin is and what he does.
Maybe this ties into one of the most important aspects of the game, and that is the writing. And I'm not talking about the story here. I'm talking about the more micro level of writing, aka the moment to moment dialogues you're going to lead. This game is written very interestingly. They call this Ruhrpott fantasy, like the designers called this Ruhrpott fantasy. What is the Ruhr area in Germany? Is a what would you? It's a mining area,
Mining industrial area.
mining
Yeah.
industrial
There's
area,
not a lot of mining
and
anymore nowadays because, well, I live there, but
yes,
it's famous for its coal mines. Yeah,
yeah, and it's in the industrial complex, and the people are generally working middle class, and there is a cultural backdrop to this in a way that the people within the game are designed after the people from the Ruhr area, so they're designed to reflect the reality of the game designers who are from that area.
which is very
And
unusual for a historic RPG, right?
yes, because it's a very German mid to late 90s way of speaking to each other. And
Yeah.
this creates such an interesting rub between the visual design of the world
And what the characters are saying. Yeah.
and what the characters are saying. So it's almost like or 90s German, West German folk are being dropped into a fantasy world. And
Yeah.
for me, that is one of the most unique things about the game. And I think that is something that gets lost in translation because it cannot possibly
Absolutely.
translate it.
Yeah. I
Even if you
remember
could
that,
translate it, people who are not German could not relate to it.
No,
I
wouldn't
don't
be
think
able to
somebody from
understand
the
it, no.
United Kingdom would even know what the joke is.
Yeah. It was very, very interesting
know?
what you said because thinking back to 2020 when you kind of said like, yeah, this game you gotta try, and you added like a subtext to that or a second line where you said like, be wary, you have to play it in German. And I was like, why? Why do I have to play it in German? I mean, I speak German fluently, but I don't really see the point. And then I started playing it actually in German. And I think in the first 30 minutes, I understood like, okay, that's
Yes.
why. There is some really, as you say, some really unique writing there that doesn't really come across in other languages. But
Yes, and people nowadays, if you look at critiques of Gothic, people like international critiques, they'll point out the world design, they'll point at the progression system, and all these types of things, but none of them point out the cultural impact of the writing, because that was something that is specific to Germany, and it's so unfortunate to me because that is something that I cannot really explain to anybody who doesn't speak German or hasn't grown up in Germany. So what happens is you go into the old camp. Finally, we're turning things back around here. We're coming full circle, and you meet this guy Bloodwin, and he is one of the guards in the old camp, and he'll stop you and he'll basically threaten you, but he does it in such a campy, funny way. He'll say something like, "Hey, little one, better watch out for yourself. You may not know what's gonna happen if you don't pay up." So he obviously leaves it open to you whether you want to pay him or not. But if you don't pay
he's
him,
asking
what
for
happens?
protection money.
He's asking you for protection money, exactly. And he sounds like a mafia guy anyway. So, and it's really funny. You can choose to pay him or not pay him. At the time, you have so little money that you're gonna not want to pay him. What happens instead, and this is so amazing how this ties back into the questing of the game, you're going to run into one of the workers there, and they're going to ask you to do a fetch quest with them. So you obviously accept that. You leave the old camp with them in order to go to some campfire and catch some items he left. And suddenly they'll turn around. Oh, by the way, this message is from Bloodwind, and they'll start attacking you. They start attacking you for not paying the protection money, and that completely hits you out of left field. And you combine that with this nonchalant, everyday 90s everyday language. It's just hilarious. The game is freaking hilarious.
Yeah. And conversely, if you do pay him, actually nothing really happens. This other exchange that you just explained doesn't happen then.
Yes.
But there is nowhere where he really does anything for you. So
It does, because what happens
Really?
if you get into a fist fight? Yeah, if you get into trouble with somebody at the old camp and they attack you for whatever reason, the guards might actually protect you.
Okay. I didn't know
think-
that, actually.
yes.
I thought there was
Yes.
nothing that he did for you.
Yeah, you can get into some brawls with people, and depending on what your standing is with the guards, they may or may not protect you. Another great game design element that we can derive from this is that there is a distinct difference between knocking somebody out and killing somebody.
Yes.
So you can knock somebody down, they lay on the ground, but then you have to go to them and actively kill them if you wanna end their life. So
And
there's
the
a
reaction of
major
people
distinction
around
between
you
that.
is different also when
Totally
you do
different.
that. Yeah, you can knock most people out because I think in the harsh world of the colony, it's kind of accepted to sometimes have a little bit of a beef with somebody and then, ending up in a fight and then one guy wins and everything. And people are kind of
Especially in the
cheering
new
you on
camp.
as well.
Especially
Yeah.
in the bandit camp, like the new camp, where manners are even rougher than in the old camp. It's fairly normal to beat each other up, and nobody kind of bats an eye. And even NPCs will stand around you and cheer you on and stuff like that.
It's like, yeah, come on, hit him. And
Der hat ihn fertig gemacht. That's my
Yeah.
favorite. Nobody will understand this outside of Germany, but that's one of my favorite
immer
voiceover
fest da
lines.
drauf.
Der hat ihn fertig gemacht. That's my favorite. It's like he
Hilarious.
beat him down, but it's delivered in such a stupid, funny way. I just freaking love it.
You just can't help smiling because of the
Yeah.
the dialogue. It's so great. Yeah.
But once you decide to kill the guy, the guards will be all over you.
Yes.
And they'll kill you.
Yeah.
And you won't stand a chance because there's no way you're going to beat up 10 guards.
No. Even if you're already quite far in the game, it's very hard to kill that many
Yes.
of them. I think if you're completely at the end and you're like in the end game, you have all the end game gear, then it's possible. But otherwise, no chance at all. that you
Yeah,
win.
because there is this chapter towards the end of the game, spoilers for a 20-plus-year-old game. There is a storyline, a plot line where the guards of the old camp betray the fire magicians, I think.
Yeah, the fire mages. Yeah.
Fire mages, and they kill a bunch of them, and you get to return. You eventually, there's no fast travel in the game, but you will find like teleport runes eventually. And the old camp at that point is guarded off. You cannot get into it, but you later in the game find the teleport rune. You can teleport into the castle, like the stronghold
this
within
temple
the
in
old camp.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're in there, and you can take revenge on all of Gomez's goons. Like Gomez is the leader of the old camp, and you can kill all his goons. And the game doesn't tell you that. The game doesn't tell you that you can do that. It's up for you to decide whether you want to teleport there and kill everybody, or you want to just let them live their lives. I always killed everybody because I thought they were such assholes,
Yeah.
and they deserved it. They had it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the demeanor of people in the three camps or in the three camps, it's kind of different as well. Like the old camps really hierarchical, where people
Yes.
are really like looking down on
Authoritarian.
people that are not, authoritarian, yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a little exchange that you have in the new camp where the game kind of semi-expects that you've been to the old camp before and you've tried to ask for talking to Gomez, who is the leader, and everybody tells you like, no, Gomez doesn't see anyone. He only talks to the people that are closest to him. And then when you go to the new camp and you talk to the guy that's basically guarding guarding the way to Lee, who's the leader of the new camp, he basically tells you like, why are you even asking this question? Of course you can go talk to Lee. Lee is not Gomez. We don't treat things the same way there. And again, there's this really big, you feel really big difference between the two camps and the way that they are run. And it also explains the existence of the new camp, because of course the new camp was created by people that didn't agree with how Gomez ran the old camp, right?
Yeah, it's basically a counter move, counter movement. You have the authoritarian old camp and the almost the almost like communist type.
Yeah, communist, a bit of anarchy kind of thing.
A mix of anarchy and communism. Like there's a lot of brawling going on. There's a lot of like infighting. And there is a little bit of a suppression also, because you do have the people who work on the rice fields. And you have the bandits looking over them, and
the rice lord,
the rice lord putting everybody to slave labor.
Yeah.
So, and then you have the swamp camp, which is just like a free-spirited...
A bunch of hippies.
A bunch of hippies living in a free-spirited community where everybody does whatever they want all day, basically. Yeah. It's so beautiful, right? These three camps, how distinct they are. Visually, lore-wise, in terms of the types of characters that inhabit them.
Yeah,
and the hierarchic structures they've built, it's just magnificent, really.
And there's a very big there's a good explanation for all three of them being there also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, enough gushing, I would say, about Gothic 1. It is time to talk about the Gothic remake, which I know you've finished already. I just finished it 2 hours ago, and we have opinions and impressions.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you take it?
Yeah. So currently we have this Steam Fest. So the demo is out right now, and it will be available until the end of the week, I believe. And the demo. So just to give it a little bit more context, right now, the old developer that created Gothic 1, Gothic 2, Gothic 3 as well. Was Piranha Bytes, a developer from Germany. But the rights currently for Gothic are not in the hands of Piranha Bytes anymore. And Piranha Bytes does not exist anymore. I think it was closed last year. And the rights to Gothic now belong to THQ Nordic, who gave the possibility or the opportunity, I'm not sure how to call it, but to develop a remake for the very first Gothic to Alchemia Interactive, I believe they're called, from Spain. And they've been working the past few years on a complete remake of the very first Gothic game, and that's the demo that we just got to play. It's I think a slightly upgraded version of the demo that was shown at Gamescom last year, and it's called the Neras demo. And the reason why it's called that way is because you're not playing the regular nameless hero, right? It does not start with the same character. You actually play a completely different character. And
it is content that is not going to be in the final game.
Correct.
So
it's
content
gated off,
uniquely made for this prologue,
which I think is kind of a decent. It's kind of a decent choice as well.
It's the Resident Evil strategy, right? Didn't Resident Evil have that?
I don't remember, but
I think Resident Evil 2 had a prologue that was unique to the demo or something like that. Yeah. So there is a interesting piece of history here that I just want to touch on very briefly. There used to be a playable teaser out in 2019 that was supposed to
horrible
to announce the existence of the Gothic remake. And it's the worst thing you've ever seen. I've never played it. I've downloaded it and I've watched a bunch of critiques on it, and it was so antithetical to the core game design and to what made Gothic that I decided to not spoil my palate by even trying it out. I've watched through a whole playthrough. I've seen numerous critiques on it, and it is something that I would have never laid my hands on.
I've not played it either, and I looked at videos of it, and I was like, wow, Who approved this, right?
Yeah.
Who thought this was okay to release, right? It
But
looked
luckily,
awful.
the community, by the way, the Gothic community in itself is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in touch with a few creators from the German Gothic community. They're the absolute kindest, most open-minded, welcoming people you'll ever meet. They're absolutely fantastic. They're absolutely bonkers for the game. And the reason we're still talking about a 24-year-old game at this point with the same amount of passion as we did 2 decades ago really speaks for itself and for the community that supports it. Luckily, THQ Nordic did listen to what the community had to say, and they came up with something that is much more akin to our taste, I believe.
Yeah. I was surprised actually, looking at screenshots and videos before I got to play the demo of the new remake, that it's very clear that they threw whatever they had back then, they just threw it away completely and they started over. And they completely started from scratch.
Yes.
And they reconsidered every feedback. That was a very important point, of course. They considered a lot of feedback that the community had about that playable teaser, and now they came up, of course, with a completely new project, which we got to play this week. And yeah, maybe can give you an idea of what I thought of it. When I
let's go.
started it up, the very first few moments, it felt a little strange, but that was only because I don't really like the running and the walking and the jumping animations that much. It made me feel similar made it feel similar to Elex.
No, they're worse than Elex. They're worse than Elex.
They're worse than Elex, yeah. At least
They're possibly some of the worst. Do you remember the first iteration of Witcher 3 before the movement got patched?
No. I don't think I played it back then.
It's worse than that. It's really bad.
It feels
Especially
sluggish and unresponsive. Yeah.
And the jumping animation is a joke. It's got to be a joke.
Yeah, it feels like you're flying or something like that.
Yeah. That's ridiculous.
That was my first impression, and it's still something that I don't like, and I gave it as a feedback also to the demo. But when I started exploring because you're kind of locked in this little valley there, and when I started exploring that valley a little bit more, first of all, I noticed the look and feel of the demo. And the look and feel, even though of course it's 20 years later, right? It's more than 20 years after the original. So of course it's going to be different, but it still felt Gothic to me. It had the same kind of gritty, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but the same kind of gritty feel. And I also like the way that they use the color palette. It's not exactly the same as the original one, which I wouldn't say is required for a remake, but it still reminded me of the original, which I really liked. And the writing, I would say, for the characters was pretty decent. The German voiceovers, I think, are relatively good. I like them. And the writing is at least in the direction of the original, because that was something that I was kind of scared of, that all of that would get lost.
Well, I wish I could find myself agreeing with you, because I do think more negatively about it.
Okay.
The first thing I noticed, the movement, fine, that is fixable. If they don't fix it, it's not a movement-based game anyway. I can live with that. I do not enjoy the voiceover. I've played the German voiceover, which I think is what most German players will use, because that's the nostalgia we have for the game, is the German voiceover. And we talked about how incredibly important that is to the overall impression of the game and the overall tone of the game. And I feel like they've homogenized the voiceover. It is so what happens in Germany, if you go see a movie in Germany in the theater, it'll be dubbed. So you watch an American movie, it'll be overdubbed with German voice actors. And the way these voice actors speak is like the way they dub commercials or Hollywood movies.
Yeah, it's a little in that direction. Nasal and airy.
ein kleines bisschen mysteriös. Warum reden die ganze Zeit so?
Like this completely
Mit
over-affectionate,
Blumenmuster. Ich studiere
this
Botanik.
over-affectionate way, this over-affectionate way of
Nobody
speaking.
speaks that way. Yeah, I
Nobody
agree
speaks
with
that
you
way.
in this case. Yeah,
But in the original, they also had an affectionate way of speaking, but it was campy and silly. It's kind of a little bit like the original Silent Hill 2 versus the remake.
to me, the voiceover was not the text was not on the nose enough. It can be a little bit more over the top because that's, I think, what we like about the original Gothic is
Yes.
that
It's very
there's-
blunt.
It's blunt, and there's this element of you. I think we said it already before, but you're not expecting that in a fantasy game. That type of language.
It sounds like it's written in English or Spanish and translated. That's what I can say.
Spanish,
and
yeah,
that's-
yeah.
And that's something that bothers me. It's not something where that stems from the use of German language. And this is culturally a German game. It is a deeply German game.
Yeah.
And I say that is rarely important, but I feel like within Gothic it is extremely important. And the old voiceovers were like theater actors from the 90s, and they had this over affectionate theatrical way of delivering their lines that, in combination with the art style and overall aesthetic of the game, just were so silly and campy in the best possible way. And that's not the case here. So that's something that for me didn't hit the mark. It didn't trigger the nostalgia. It did not hit me in the feels, for the lack of a better word.
Yeah.
I did not like the exchanging camera angles within the dialogues, like the shaky camera for no reason. I loved how simple and blunt the presentation was in the original. You'd have one camera angle where you overview the two characters talking to each other. And once again, maybe that works so well because the original art style is so stylized and simplified.
Yeah.
But now we've moved to Unreal Engine 5 and we're going for a naturalist, slightly overhyped naturalist, let's say hyper-realist look.
Yeah.
And
I
it
don't
does
think it's
not-
that realistic, to be honest. There is still this. To me, the game doesn't really trigger that uncanny valley effect. Luckily,
Oh, for me, it does completely.
It
For me,
does,
it does
okay.
completely. Yeah. Unfortunately, it does. I think Diego looks really good. I thought the other NPCs looked absolutely horrendous. Oh, actually, the guy who was mining away the
Kirgo. Yeah.
the blockage. Kirgo
He looked good.
Kirgo looked very good.
Yeah.
Kirgo looked very good. Yes, and Diego did as well.
Yeah.
Diego didn't sound good. I didn't like the voice actor of Diego. I'm sorry. He was
me
good,
neither.
but he was not Diego. I think that actor is very competent, and he should have been given another role.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I feel like I would have preferred to not go for a realistic art style. I would have loved if they kept the original art style and cranked it up to 11.
Yeah. Like more stylized and more.
Completely stylized. Like one of the most iconic things about Gothic are that the fact that the hands are square,
Square,
cubic
yeah.
fists.
Yeah.
Cubic fists. And I always love that when they do their gestures, that it looks so absolutely silly with their fists bouncing around in the air. And I would have loved if they kept that, because suddenly your character will pick up an object and do this sterile, repetitive animation, and the object will be removed from the table like this.
Yeah.
Now, in the original art style, it makes total sense because it's a simplified look. It's almost like the art style is so simple that the real image happens in your head, is processed in your head.
There's a suspension of disbelief that's triggered by the way that it looks.
And it's almost like you see the character in your mind picking it up. It's almost like the graphics on screen are a stand-in for what is actually happening in your head.
Yeah.
It's
It's
the
like
same thing
reading a
with
book,
Super
right? Where
Nintendo.
you read some information and your brain fills in the rest. Yeah.
And that does not happen with the new art style. It really bothers me that the guy is not actually picking up the object now. It didn't bother me in the original.
Yeah, I wonder because I do see your point, but I wonder because of course what they're going to be trying to do is attract a whole new audience, right? It's clear that they're respectful to the original fans and they're very much listening to feedback
Of course.
from the community as well. but at the same time, they're going to be trying to attract a whole new audience as well, because maybe you and I are more on the exceptional side, where even though you played it the original back in the day, you're still playing today. But a lot of people in our age will have stopped playing by now, so the community is not big enough to really drive the game. So I'm wondering if they're doing that or staying away from the approach that you're kind of suggesting to have a bigger chance of attracting a new audience.
I feel like it now sits in the uncanny valley of edginess. Like the original was so clunky and edgy that became the thing. The new Gothic, the remake, is trying to be not edgy. It's trying to be polished, but it isn't.
And therefore,
So
it's
I
kind of
feel like-
sitting in an uneasy middle ground or something like
In
that.
an uneasy middle ground of clunk that I'm not super happy with as far as the demo goes. I'm
Yeah.
also being hypercritical because you're tinkering with what is possibly one of my favorite pieces of art of all time.
Yeah, it's a personal invasion in your childhood, kind of, right? Yeah,
Yes,
maybe
you're
that's also
messing with
why
my
I'm not so
memories here.
triggered by it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if we were to do, or if somebody were to do the same thing with Deus Ex, which is kind of probably what my well, I know you like it too, but it's probably
No,
what
no, it's my
Gothic
favorite
is.
game of all time.
Yes,
Gothic and Deus Ex, my two favorite games of all time, no doubt about it.
but Deus Ex is something that I also played back in the day, so
Me
I'm
too.
not so sure if I would have the same opinion if somebody were messing with my baby, right? If Deus Ex 1 was going to be remastered, then probably it would be different.
I don't like the Square Enix Deus Exes.
No,
I think they're okay games.
yeah.
They're not great Deus Exes.
Yeah, they missed the point of Deus Ex 1, right?
It's a massive step backwards from the original.
It's too big of a topic for this
Yes,
talk, though.
let's not go there. Let's
It's
not
a
go there,
huge
but it's- yeah.
iceberg.
Yes. I mean, there is potential here for this remake to be fantastic because Gothic 1
yeah.
in many ways was put together in a very short amount of time. And there's a lot of content missing. Like there are areas in the map where clearly more things were supposed to be happening than ended up in the game. Like I think there's like a little valley within a set of mountains where there's a bunch of goons and monsters hanging out. And you can clear that out, but you clearly see there was something else supposed to happen here that didn't make it into the game. So once they fill up these areas, there is really a good reason to be revisiting the remake and actually check it out what they thought this could have been. They probably even found some marks in the source code, in the original source code, or that
Where
they could
things
probably
were missing
use
that were never completed or something like
Yes.
that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I have to kind of like conclude my thoughts about the remake demo with something very positive, and that is that with every step of the way that I've seen Alchemia Interactive now working on this, they seem super open to feedback from the community. So what I saw a couple days ago, for instance, Jorgensen was streaming the remake demo, and from beginning till the end, Kai Rosenkrantz was in the chat.
He's the we have to give some context. That's the composer of the music of the original, and he is a part of the team of the remake as well.
Correct. Yeah, doing the music, but also involved in other topics. And he was kind of like aggregating all kinds of feedback, not only from Jorgensen himself, but also from the other people in the chat that were there. Which
And Jorgensen and Korga in particular, they know more about Gothic, like out of the player community.
they're
than
walking
anybody
Gothic
else.
almanacs, basically.
It's ridiculous. I've watched some of the Jorgensen stream where he tries out the game, and he really tests every little mechanic that there possibly can be in the game, and judges it compared to the original. And it's quite a sight to behold. It's great that Kai Rosenkrantz is so involved with the community as well.
Yeah.
I also have to say the soundtrack in both the originals and from what I can tell also in the remake are absolutely outstanding.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah. That's a
outstanding.
point we didn't go into at all. It's kind of weird,
Yes.
being surrounded by these apparatuses,
Yeah.
apparati. that we didn't go into the music at all, but the music is fantastic. It's
Yes.
really, really great, and it's really from a time, and that's, I think, another difference between today's gaming and gaming back then is that it's from a time where it was okay that the music was very much in the forefront. Also, it's
Yes.
very, very audible. It's not
It was
just there.
distinct.
It's
It was
distinct,
distinct. It
but
was
it's
not- yeah.
also in the mixing where it's louder than it would be, right? Than it would be right now, and also that how do you say that? Music in gaming nowadays kind of, it feels like they were told that you need to hide behind the rest, right? It's not
Yes.
supposed to be in the foreground, and back then it was right there in your face and audible, and all those tricks are super memorable as well.
Yes. Yeah. Big up to Kai Rosenkranz, and also he was like a teenager during Gothic 1.
Amazing.
Well, Gothic
Yeah.
1 was being made.
Amazing.
Like, he was like 18 or something. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Absolute OG.
Yeah.
Shall we wrap this one up? I think we've been going on for an hour here.
Yeah,
Hour
it's a
plus.
little.
I think we
it's
should.
about an hour now. Yeah, I think we've kind of expressed everything that we kind of could express in this time about Gothic. It was great fun, I think.
Yes.
This
Let's
was
do this again. We do have a couple topics written out here
yeah.
that I see in our spreadsheet that we're going to tackle in the future.
It's not over. We're gonna return with with
more
our with more of the same.
hot takes.
More hot takes and
More hot takes.
all right.
More elitist opinions that nobody asked for.
Yeah, but we're still gonna give them.
And
Right.
undermine them with zero expertise and merit.
Yeah, and no skill at all.
Yeah. Well,
All
it's been a
right.
pleasure, man.
Yeah. Big thank you to you, Martin.
Big thank you to the two people that made it to the end.
Yeah, that are still here and haven't fallen
That are
asleep. All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everybody, for watching, and see you in the next one.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.